Actually, my vocation story starts, we could go way back, I guess. My family's got to Texas I think the first relative got to Texas in 1827 through Indianola, went overland, settled around Boerne, Texas, which is down south, south of San Antonio. So my whole family's from that area. German side and on one half, and Polish on the other half. And the Polish side came and they settled in Santa Maria, which is also down there on the other side of San Antonio. So very Catholic family, very Catholic background, very, there in Santa Maria, they still speak Polish after Mass on Sundays. And actually they even have Polish Masses as well. And I didn't know this, but I have a great uncle who was parish priest in a small parish there, Czestochowa, close by. He was priest there about 30 years. And I have another priest, actually, in the relative on my dad's side as well, who was still is, professor of liturgy at the seminary in Austin, Father Leon Strider. Some of you might know him. I don't know. And on my mother's side, my grandmother first came to Texas because her older brother, was a missionary priest here in Texas, down in that area as well. And so, not knowing it, I didn't know this until long after I had already joined the seminary. And I didn't meet this priest who's teaches there in the seminary until about 2 years ago when I came to Austin to do a wedding, my sister's wedding, and he can celebrate it with me. So it doesn't mean you have a vocation because there's others in your family that have a vocation, but the amazing thing is probably looking back in your own families, you might see things that you don't even suspect at this point. And it just goes to show you that so many things we're ignorant of, but later those come out. And you start seeing a pattern that in the beginning didn't seem to make any sense. Who's been to Rome?
Okay, bragger.
They don't want to say how many times I should ask that. No. Well, I lived there just for 5 years. And got to go through the Vatican Museum several times, on my own or doing tours with other groups and things like that. And so you go to the BI and you've probably seen tapestries. Well, they have these huge tapestries. They're, ceiling to the floor. They're about 20 feet tall, about 50, 60 feet long, some of them. If you go behind them, what does it look like? Have you seen a tapestry from the backside? It's just full of little threads, different colored threads going all over the place, And it doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't have anything, and you don't understand at all what kind of tapestry it's going to be looking at the backside. But you go to the front, and there are these beautiful, amazing tapestries that were created during the Renaissance, and they have maps on them. They have scenes from the Bible. They look like they're painted. They're so well done. So what do you feel like many times in your life? You feel like that little thread that doesn't understand why I'm next to this green one and there's the red one and whatever, Like, what's going on? I don't understand. But the Lord's saying, just stay there because He sees the front. He knows what the big picture is. And all these little threads that are going through your life that you don't understand, don't worry about it. The important thing is just to figure out, where does God want me? Because that's what's going to make the big picture beautiful. Okay? So real quick, I was born here in Dallas, in Richardson, 36 years ago, so you don't have to worry. That's how old I am. And moved to Corpus Christi after that, where my dad had been born as well. Lived there another 3 years. When I was 7, my dad got a job offer to go to Anchorage, Alaska. So,
yeah.
That's what my mom said. She was like, yeah, right. She's a Texan girl, South Texas, not ready for cold weather. And my dad said, well, let's just go a few years, because he had been in the service. He'd been overseas in Germany. My sister was born and everything. So they're like, okay, a few years, Well, we ended up staying there 10 years. And so basically I grew up there from the time I was 7 to 17. And it's beautiful. It's amazing. It's the last frontier. I mean, if Texas is big, Alaska is more than twice as big. If you cut Alaska in half, Texas would be the third biggest. It's that big.
Wow.
And it's empty. There's nothing there.
Bears.
There's a lot of bears, and there's a lot of priests. Well, not a lot of priests, but there's missionary priests that are amazing. The first time I wanted to be a priest, I was thinking, I want to be a pilot. And all the priests in Alaska were pilots, because the only way to get around is flying a bush plane. Everybody behind their house has a bush plane, on the lake there. So it's true. It's amazing. So I was like, that'd be cool, And then we were like camping and hiking and stuff in the mountains. You don't have to come back on Sunday because you can have mass anywhere you are because you're the priest. I was like, yeah. I've been a priest 4 years. I haven't done it yet, so I'm like, Anyways, I mean, not that far out. So really, so schooling, what did I do in school? So first I was in Catholic school through sixth grade. I was telling them before, at that point, the Catholic school wasn't really Catholic anymore. My religion teacher was Protestant. There were no more nuns. We were doing reading these really weird books in English class that was almost pornographic. What's going on here, So my parents were like, why are we paying this money to send you to a place where you're going to lose your faith anyway? Just don't pay and send you public school. So that's what I did. 7th and 8th grade, I went to public school, and just public school. You're just there, you're crowding, going through the crowds, sort of type of thing, And in what was it? Towards the end of 8th grade, I had two really good friends. They were twins, who were Protestants, and they basically had problems with school and stuff, and so their parents pulled them out. In Alaska, homeschooling was very popular, not just because for Catholic people or Protestants, but also because people live out so far, So they started doing homeschool for that. It's not like we lived out that far, but anyway. And so they convinced me when I was going into high school to do homeschooling because we could be together and goof off together and have fun and, whatever. So, which we never did, actually. But anyways, we tried to. So in 9th grade, I went to my mom and said, I want to homeschool too because my sister had already started. My little sister started by then. I think my brother was too. So only my older sister, we're 5 kids, 2 girls, then it's me and a little brother and my little sister. So my mom said, forget it. You're home too much as it is. You can stay out of the house as much as you want. Just don't go. I was a little bit rambunctious, let's put it that way. So, being the middle kid, I was sort of, I had lots of energy, I guess. And just, those fists were always trying to get going, and sort of picking fights here and there. And so my brother survived, but just barely.
I almost got him.
And the worst was my older sister. Girls nice and pretty and nice and gentle and everything, but they're very conniving. And my sister knew exactly how to get me in trouble. So what she do is pick on me. She even admits it now. If she ever watches this, Chandra, you can, So she would pick on me until I couldn't resist and start trying to punch her and stuff and yell for my mom. My mom's like, Kristian, what are you doing? You're gonna, So. And then she's like, oh, he's hitting me. What did you do? Nothing. I was I was so mad I couldn't even see straight, so much less speak. So what happened is that when I got to be a little bit bigger than she was, we became friends really quick. And we're great friends today. I mean, we used to go to the Junior Legion of Mary together every Saturday morning, skiing, hiking, tennis, whatever. So when I got home, and I told my mom I wanted to go and do homeschooling as well, she wasn't really convinced. And so I had to convince her that I was going to change my ways and convert and become a true Catholic and behave like one at home as well. At school, I was perfect. Out of the house, I had no problems. I was my parents never believed my teachers, and my teachers never believed my parents. It was 2 lives. It was not schizophrenic, but it was, I just when you're at home, you're at home, you're comfortable. It's just if something doesn't go right, just fix it. But it just didn't always work that way. So I started homeschooling, and that changed a lot because we used to go to not daily mass, but at least every a couple times a week, and just being closer to home, being closer to family. helped a lot. And then as well, we had gone through sort of searching for a church, for a pastor, for a priest that could sort of respond to the needs of the family as well. My mom had been growing in her faith. My father had been in the minor seminary when he was growing up. I think maybe 1 year of major seminary as well, before he discerned it wasn't his vocation. So we had lots of Catholic practices, obviously, and faith, but they were growing in their faith, in their prayer life, and what that meant, and what it meant to really live that out, and especially in the family, how to do that. Because it's not easy, and everybody has their own path and growth in the faith. So looking for a church, a parish that sort of was on the same wavelength, you could say, we found this priest, Father Alfred Giebel, at St. Benedict's Parish, I remember. So the first time we get there, on the Sunday, he'd be waiting there to start Mass in his full cassock, with his tri-point hat on, and we were just amazed. And as soon as we got there, he said, of course, the boys can be altar servers, and he basically just adopted us. I'd go with my brother a lot of times on weekends to work for him in the church. We'd help out anywhere, doing anything, and he'd come over to the house all the time. Just a very good relationship. I'm a very holy priest. I'm very dedicated, very faithful, and so that started me thinking more probably about the priesthood. But he never talked to us about the priesthood. He never invited me to the seminary. In fact, you might not know this, but 20 years ago when I was looking at the seminary, it was hard to find a seminary in the United States that you knew was going to be really faithful to the church's teachings. There was lots of things going on since the 60s that you've probably heard about, might not have, but that was still going, sort of getting out of the system. Now it's changed quite a bit, thankfully. And the bishops have done a very good job of making sure the seminaries are teaching the faith and teaching and informing men well. So what happened was that the other part of the priests, the other priests I knew were the Jesuits, because the Jesuits were the missionaries who evangelized Alaska. I'm starting with a Spanish missionary and going all the way up. So now they're still mostly Jesuits. And in fact, I started working. This was another one of my mom's ways to get me out of the house and keep me busy and doing constructive things. I started working there at the retreat center, which was run by the Jesuits. But again, there I knew them and I just appreciated them. We'd go fishing together. We'd go, salmon fishing, this and that. But I never had a feeling that I was called to be either a diocesan priest or a Jesuit. And it's interesting. And then met another very good Jesuit, because my sisters, both my older sisters, went to Thomas Aquinas College in California. And there was a priest, Father Steckler, who was another Jesuit, who was chaplain there. And I spoke to him as well later on about my vocation. He didn't say I shouldn't, well, he sort of did. Well, he didn't think I should become a Jesuit. And he told me that the Legion was a good group and faithful. And so not having anywhere to go in that way, I didn't know what to do, And I was thinking, well, where should I go? So how did I meet the Legion? Okay, so basically, I was going through high school, and my mom would always teach us too. You gotta find out what God wants for you. You're gonna be happiest doing what God wants, right? That little thread that we were talking about earlier is not gonna be happy, right? It's not gonna make that beautiful tapestry being somewhere else. You can get up and go and walk somewhere else and go, I'm going to fit in right here. Okay, you can, it works, but it's not beautiful. It's not what's going to make that thread the happiest. Because in the end, it's going to I'm sort of out of place here, aren't I? And that's what happens with us sometimes. So you have to listen to that. And that's your heart, that's your conscience speaking to you. Well, it's God speaking to you through your heart and your conscience and your intellect. So I was thinking about that, and she'd always say, you got to pray that if God calls you to be a priest, you'll find the place to go, or my sisters, if God calls them to be nuns. And if you're called to be married, to find a good holy wife, if you're called to be single, to find out what your mission is, what your goal is. And so my prayer was always to, because she said, good Catholic wife, beautiful as well, if you want. So my prayer was always to find a beautiful wife who was also Catholic. you know? And I did. I found Mary, you know. I just didn't realize that at the time. So, and so I was just, I mean, that aspect too, I was normal. I was, you know, dating girls and stuff. We had a rule in the family. You couldn't date till you were 16. So I didn't have any official dates till I was 16. It was like, you know, just sort of gotta, you know. Anyways, nothing bad, okay? Just, you know, normal kids, right? So basically, let's see. So it's getting towards, I was a sophomore in high school when I met the first legionary. And that was Father Kermit Siren, whose family is from Alaska as well. Very big family. I knew a lot of his siblings. One of his siblings, Lester, was our director for the Junior Legion of Mary. His sisters used to come over and babysit us. Just one of those big Catholic families, sort of everybody knows, you know. And they had like 12 kids, I think. At one point, I didn't find out about this until many years later, until I think it was at my ordination. My mother told me this story. Once she went over to Mrs. Siren to explain all my, you know, basically my litany of sins, and asked this lady for advice. Having so many sons, she said, "What do I do with this kid of mine? He's just driving me crazy." So at the end of this conversation, you know, this litany of sins, she looks at my mom. She says, "Don't worry, he's going to become a priest." I was like, "What? Did you need some Q-tips? Did you hear what I said?" I mean, she's like, yes, I heard what you said, but he'll be fine. He'll be fine. Yeah. So we'd always drive past this place called McLaughlin. Okay, McLaughlin was the children's correctional facility in Anchorage, Alaska. Barbed wire and tall towers and spotlights and stuff like that. You know? And my mother's like, "If you continue the way you are, you're going to end up there." Everybody in my family asks, "What's McLaughlin?" They all know. They all know because it's always about me. Anyways. So the funniest thing was like outside it, like with my friends, I was always like making peace with everybody, and I won't tell you those stories now. That was, anyways. So my friends should have gone there. They might have ended up there. I don't know. But anyways, something like that. So what happens is that he got ordained. Father Kermit Siren got ordained in 1991 by the Holy Father with a group of 60 legionary priests. It was the 50th anniversary of the Legion of Christ, the founding of the Legion of Christ. And he came back to Anchorage for his first Mass there, and we went. It was in the cathedral, packed. I mean, it's a huge Catholic family. Everybody in the diocese, I think, was there. And we ended up going, of course, and, you know, making jokes, Father Kermit the Frog, and all this stuff. So my mom's like, stop that, he's a priest. You know? So we were just there to have fun. We were just hang out with my friends, and I actually, during the party, I just told my mom like a month ago. She was like, "What? I can't believe you did." So I went in with my friend across the street, this fancy hotel, and had like, you know, a $10 coffee and cake or something like that. Just for, you know, we're sophomores. We're like, you know, we're big, right? You know. Anyways, so when I'm a junior, I mean, all this is going through my mind. You know, what do I do? Where does God want me? What am I supposed to do? And it was getting stronger and stronger as I was growing up. So I was a junior, and at one point my dad says, "You know, I think our stint here in Alaska has been pretty good, but it's time to move on. You know, the oil industry is always sort of fluctuating quite a bit, and there's a good moment to get out." So he said, let's go back. And then we ended up back in Texas. So we ended up in Austin. My parents still live, and it was a radical change. I mean, we thought we were going to live in Alaska forever, you know. But we'd always been here in Texas, you know, every summer pretty much, visiting relatives and things like that. So it wasn't that big of a shock, I suppose. But it was here in Austin, basically, when this whole thing started coming to a head. I mean, I was, you know, at the end of my junior year, getting ready for senior year. I never finished school on time, you know, homeschooling. I was... my first year, I finished the first year like a week before I had to start the second. And then I started getting better. You know, little by little. Because basically I homeschooled myself. I mean, I was in Seton as well, but my mother didn't really do almost anything with me. She was taking care of my little brother and sister and stuff. And I did have some really good tutors, actually. my chemistry professor was my grandfather. Opa, we called him, very German. Opa and Oma. And he taught chemistry for Texas A&I, which is now an A&M in Kingsville. So I'd call him up whenever I had problems, and he'd give me this huge explanation of, and it's sort of hard to follow being in high school, but still. I had a great math teacher as well who worked for the NASA in Austin.
Oh.
So I'd take my math books, and we'd exchange hours. I'd babysit for an hour, and he'd teach me math for an hour. So he'd look at these books, and I was like, what is this? And I'd go to the blackboard and all this stuff. And it's like, he worked on building and designing like these space landing craft and stuff like that. It was like high advanced math. I'm like, I'm a junior in high school. I don't understand.
He built rockets.
He's like, do you understand? I was like, Get me out of here. So anyways, so it was pretty funny. But anyways, so I homeschooled, I got through it, and survived and came out pretty well, I guess. So actually my SATs, I forgot what I get on my SATs actually,
Me too.
thankfully. But I think I did pretty good. So the funny thing was that it didn't really matter in the end because all I did was go to the seminary. But anyways,
Proof
so
that
I got to.
not necessary.
So in the end, what happened was at one point I get this phone call. I'm there in Austin, senior by then in high school. I get this phone call, this Hispanic voice, I was like, hello, your father, brother. No, I wasn't a father yet, obviously. I got your name from a priest, from a Legionary priest, because we had gone to this conference, Human Life International Conference in Houston, I think it was, and ran into some legionaries there. And of course, my mother, whenever she sees priests, she goes, "Oh, what's your name? Give me your phone number." So I was going out with some friends one night, and my mom says, "No, where are you going? There's some priest coming over." I was like, "Yes, but that happens every night, Mom." I mean, no, these are good priests. You gotta stay. You gotta wait. It's like, oh, okay, fine. So they came over to the house and put on a video and presentation and that kind of thing, and we talked afterwards, one-on-one sort of thing. And he said, how are your grades? How's your health? You ever thought about being a priest? And I said, yeah, it's the last of the three options, though. And he goes, what? I was like, what do you mean, what? You're the priest. You don't know about the three options? And he's like, what options? I said, well, priest, married, or single, right? I said, oh, yeah. Well, if that's the case, what do you think about coming out to the seminary? I said, no, it's the last of the three options. so I never went to the seminary to check it out until, and so he basically forgot about me, I think. Maybe he was praying, I don't know. But at one point, because the seminary was in Cheshire, Connecticut, and I was in Austin, Texas, so I was like, I'm not going to, fly out there just for a weekend? I was like, I was from Alaska. I wasn't used to that kind of thing. So basically, but one summer I did go out there actually, and the funny thing was when I walked into the seminary, we were driving out actually to my sister's school in Maine, or where was it? Rhode Island. I forgot it was Christendom or one of the Magdalene. I forgot where she went. Anyway, so we drove out there, and I was like, oh, we're going through Connecticut. Mom, we got to stop at the seminary. It's here somewhere. She's like, well, find it. So I looked on the map. I was like, oh, my gosh. And we found this little tiny town in Cheshire. It was like, oh, it's not too far. So we just drop in, and walk in the front door. And the first one I saw was the priest that had visited us in Austin. It was like, what are you doing here? Oh, we're just driving through. It was like, yeah, right. Oh, really? We were just driving through. We were on the way. Okay. So anyways. I've used that excuse many times in my life. But anyways, so we get there. I saw the seminary, very nice, interesting, and everything. But what changed things was that call from this Mexican guy. So he's a family from Monterey who had been in Regnum Christi and got familiar with it, which is you can say the lay movement the legionaries work with. It's an easy way of putting it. And he was getting a doctorate at UT. So the priest that we had met there in Houston gave him my name, and he said, could I meet with you? And I was, sure. When? He's like, well, so we agreed on a coffee shop close to my house. I'm 17, and this guy's asking me for an appointment. I'm like, let me check my agenda. I think I'm free for like the next 5 years. Probably. So anyways, so we get there, have a Coke or something, some chips, and he starts explaining to me. He's like, okay, what we do is we get these youth groups together and we do talks and stuff. And so would you be interested? I'm like, I guess so. I mean, I was like, so what you get to do is you get boys together, like, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grades, whatever, and you do sports with them, or whatever you want to do with them, a hike or an outing, and you just take your gospel, and you like sit down somewhere, and you teach them the gospel, It's like, oh, okay, that's all? It's like, yeah, that's all. It's like, okay, sounds pretty easy, I guess. So I get on the phone and start calling all my mom's friends and say, hey, you guys send me your boys, we're going to do this Catholic boys club, And so amazingly, they sent me their kids, and so we started, and we did a couple canoe trips, I think, and some other things. And at the end of the year, we had gotten together enough boys, and there was the Legionnaries held a weekend camp out down by the LBJ Ranch, west of Austin. So I just turned 18, I think. I get my mom's station wagon, load up all these boys. I don't know why their parents trusted me. I mean, but anyways, and drive them out there myself, to this camp out. We had a great time. I had a blast. I don't know what the kids were doing. I was having fun. I was just like, anyways, so we get there, and how are we doing on time? We still got...
We got an hour.
Oh, we got an hour. That's great. Okay, so so going through this, and but still, I wasn't hearing what God wanted. I'm like, okay, wait. Every single day, when I go to Mass, especially on Sundays, you get there to Mass, receive Holy Communion, I just kneel down and say, Lord, tell me what you want. What's your will? I don't. So I tell the Legionnaries when they come through, or a priest I talk to, it's like, I'm not hearing anything. And they say, well, that means you need to listen more, And listening means prayer. But, prayer in silence, where you can actually hear the Lord. So they suggested I pray the rosary every day, and they suggested I try and do a holy hour, Eucharistic hour, once a week. Well, the rosary, I think I lasted maybe 3 days, I don't know. It was just, I don't know. Anyways, and but my mother had been doing a Eucharistic hour for every week for a long time, I think, to try and convert me, sort of like St. Monica type of thing. So one day I go up to her and say, hey, Mom, I think I want to go with you. And she's like, what? What's your name? Are you okay? Like, do you have a temperature? And towards that end of the year, with all these things going on, and thinking, of course, where am I going to go to college? I'd been doing college applications here and there, these Catholic colleges and stuff, and I'm like, but I really didn't have any idea of what I wanted to study or anything. So at a certain point, it was probably a month before I, finished high school. I'm like, okay. I just knelt down before our Lord, there in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. I said, okay, fine. This is it. You got to tell me. The ultimatum. Do you want me to be a priest or not? In that moment, I was just sure he said yes. He's like, was it a voice? Well, it wasn't a human voice, obviously. It wasn't something you could hear physically. My mom didn't hear anything. She was right next to me, But I was just sure he said yes. And so I started thinking, what do I have to give up? My girlfriend, my mountain bike, I'd pay like $800 for it. And this and that, I was like, well, but I can't say no to God, I said, okay, all right, I'll do it, And then I had a month to figure out, well, where am I going to go? And like I told you before, well, I didn't know of any really good Catholic seminaries. Peoria, Illinois, that was the only one back then that was like noted in Catholic circles for being extremely faithful. But I didn't know anybody in Illinois. I'd never been there. I was like, that's like the middle of the country. I live like Alaska and Texas. Like,
So far.
That's over there. So, and the Jesuits, which I liked, but then he told me, no, I don't think you're called to be a Jesuit. And so I was like, okay. So that's what I did. I said, well, I knew about this program for the summer to go and try it out. It's called the candidacy. And so you become a candidate, and then you get elected. No, you do. The election depends on God, right? And you go and just live with the seminarians for 3 months. So I was so cheap. I wouldn't even buy a plane ticket. I bought a Greyhound ticket. It was like $60, but it's 48 hours straight on a bus.
Oh yeah.
I was like drugged on candy and so my Walkman. When I got there, I was like, I got off the bus. But I walked in there, and they were having this amazing lunch with like some benefactors or something, and playing the Phantom of the Opera. And I was like, with the band, the seminary band, I was like, yes, this is it. This is amazing, And we have soccer every day, and sports and basketball, and that's why I have a black eye. If you want to know about it, it was basketball 2 days ago. So I still play basketball. I just had a great time, And it just felt like it fit. It felt like I was at home, So after about 2 weeks, I didn't tell anybody, but I really just told myself, this is it, And it's like, I don't know, maybe for the girls, it's like when you're trying on shoes, And you just, it's like, it's got to fit, It's got to fit. And you can what's the difference between a half a size or an extra large or whatever you call them, an E or whatever. It's not that big a difference looking at it from the outside. But when you try it on, it makes all the difference, And it's just got to fit. And that's what the vocation is like. I mean, in the end, you just got to try it out, right? You can't just simply sit at home and say, okay, this is what God wants, and now I know, and that's it. Okay, that's the first thing, is to receive a calling, to hear a calling. Vocation comes from vocare, what? Latin, right? Means to call. That was easy. To call. So, vocation means God calls. God calls each one of us to do something in our life. And the important thing is to hear that and then try it. You got to try it. That's the second part of a vocation. So you have the subjective part, which is God speaking to me and me hearing that, obviously. And then the objective part, which is trying it on to see if it fits and seeing, does the church approve this? Okay, it's not just me, but it's also the objective part that comes from, from God through the church to say, yes, this vocation, your calling is authentic. You're meant to be here. Okay. So that's basically the story. After that, just a quick summary of the last 18 years. Basically, I was in Connecticut there for 2 years, between Connecticut and New York, for novitiate. Novitiate is time when you really test your call in depth. You're living there in the seminary, 2 years, spiritual battleground where you're laying the foundations for your entire life. So prayer, silence, meditation, sacraments, and away from the world. Much less contact in that time with your family, with the world, with news and things, because you're just concentrating on laying those foundations of your friendship with Christ. Then year of humanity, so Latin, Greek, all those great languages, and history and everything else. And then from there, normally we'd start philosophy, but I was asked to do my apostolic internship prior to philosophy. And so I started right there in the seminary. I was 2 years in the seminary as assistant for the new guys coming in, so basically mentoring to them, helping them adapt to the seminary life, etc. And then I was asked to go on missions, and that was fun. That was an amazing change. So I went down to Caracas, Venezuela, for 2 years, and I studied a little bit of Spanish, but when I got there, I didn't understand a word. They have a weird accent. They cut off all the S's. And so it took a little while, but I had a great time. Beautiful country, lots of problems, lots of difficulties, but it's just you see how much God needs you, There, I remember we did missions in Holy Week in the Amazons, basically on the other side of Brazil, on the border with Brazil. And they hadn't had a priest for 13 years. And we'd go out in this dugout canoe 4 hours down the river, down the Orinoco River, to these little Indian villages. And missionize and catechize. And it was just amazing. The years after that, they would take them in National Guard helicopters and drop them off these villages even more remote in the jungle and leave them there for like a week, for Holy Week, and pick them up at the end of the week. I mean, it's just, there's so much to be done. There's so many needs. And so you see that, and it just wakes you up. And you're like, oh, when can I become a priest? This is what they need. They're like, yeah, brother, you're really nice, good seminarian. It's like, are there any priests, And that's what's needed are missionaries who are willing to give their lives. So from there, I went to Rome. Rome was amazing. 5 years living in the Eternal City. learning Italian. All our classes were in Italian. Everything from day one. Actually, I got there a week late. So it's like, and I never studied Italian. Not once. Well, no, I did read a little bit of a book on the airplane. I didn't understand a word because I hadn't learned Italian yet. So, but it was great. And there too, I was working with youth once again in Venezuela. Same thing. I was in charge of the boys' lower school. I had 500 boys. One time I was at my desk, 22 years old, 500 boys, about 30 teachers. Thinking, what am I doing here? I don't even speak the language. It was like, okay, Lord, you work with me. You're doing it. So we gotta go. So from there, 6 years in the north of Italy, Milan. We have a minor seminary and novitiate there, and I was working there. And since ordination 4 years ago, I was there as vice rector, helping once again those young seminarians to find their own vocation and to follow it and form themselves and prepare themselves. So we thank the Lord for my own vocation, for all vocations, to religious, consecrated, priestly life. And let's pray, as the gospel says today, that the Lord will send more laborers into his harvest.